My name is Dennis Big. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is missing.
Okay, what's his name?
Chris Benoit.
Chris Benoit was considered by many of us in the business as being one of the greatest workers in wrestling.
He was nicknamed the Rabid Wolverine, the Canadian Crippler.
They've tried to reach his wife, Nancy. She doesn't answer. They tried to call his house.
I plan on ruling the wrestling world.
She was in love, more in love than I'd ever seen her in my life.
This was during Chris and Nancy's wedding. Daniel was the best man, of course.
All right, we'll go ahead and send somebody out there to check on it.
Well, the wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son. Police now treating the discovery as a double murder-suicide.
On June 25th, 2007, Chris Benoit's brutal murder of his wife and son dominated the news cycle, leaving the world searching for answers.
Going over it in my mind, like, why did this happen? How did it happen? Could it have been stopped?
Authorities say Benoit strangled his wife and suffocated his son before hanging himself in their home.
The term that's been being thrown around everywhere is roid rage.
When you look at Christopher Benoit's brain, it is in fact shocking.
For over a decade, those closest to the killings have been left traumatized and desperate for closure. For the first time, friends and family have come together to tell the story in their own words.
Chris was just this gentle giant, and I could never have imagined that he could hurt someone.
He was probably the greatest wrestler that's ever lived. And to have that same person have murdered your family, that's not an easy statement for me to make.
That's not the Chris that I knew. There's so many details that are so crazy to understand.
I need to talk about this. If you don't want to hear it, if you're going to give me shit about it later and say I'm glorifying a murder, stop listening now.
All right, you ready?
Let's rock.
All right, so first, can you tell us who you are?
I'm David Benoit, son of Chris Benoit. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, I believe.
There's the cross. Oh, no! I lost all this here!
That was just his job. As soon as he got off the road, he was just dad. That was it, no matter what. My grandfather took him to his very first show in Edmonton. And then he saw the Dynamite Kid.
Against the Dynamite Kid, also 214 from Liverpool.
And then he's like, yep, that's what I want to do. My dad, he looked up to him. That was his idol. He emulated him, his work ethic, nothing like it. And then he would do his signature flying headbutt. He would climb up to the top rope, jump off spread eagle, and connect. Busted his ass in the ring every single night. Gave it 120%, no matter what. I got my very first Nintendo, and I had WCW Mayhem, and I played as him.
Chris Benoit was on the radar as a pro wrestler since, gosh, the 80s. I'm Jim Ross, got in wrestling in 1974. I'm now the senior advisor to AEW. I'm a wrestling fan, so if you're a wrestling fan, how could you not be a fan of Chris Benoit's work? He's always considered one of the best workers ever, even when he's young. He was just a natural.
My name is Chris Jericho. I've been wrestling for a long time, almost 30 years. Watching Chris Benoit was one of the reasons why I really enjoyed Stampede Wrestling and why I started really thinking, maybe I can do this.
Benoit's a rookie, but he does have the moves.
To watch Stampede Wrestling, you could tell that the guys were smaller guys. They were not as tall as the giants that you could find in the WWF. I thought, wow, like they're kind of my size. So in that aspect, someone like Chris Benoit was kind of an early influence on me. The most intense and believable performer I've ever been in the ring with. He could see things that would happen before they happened. His first job was wrestling, and his last job was wrestling. All he ever did was wrestling. The only thing he ever got a paycheck from was wrestling.
I was a huge fan of Chris Benoit right off the get-go. He's the ultimate performer. Dean Malenko. I wrestled for ECW, WCW, and of course WWF/WWE. Chris is very quiet, very reserved, you know, very serious guy, and kind of like into his own little world at times, but when that red light went on and that bell rang, Chris Benoit was a whole nother person. Extreme extremely focused, probably one of the most focused individuals I've ever seen in any sport for that matter. Chris took nothing less than being perfect.
I did a few tours with Benoit over in Japan, and we had a match. I gave him a spin kick, and I didn't hit him in the head with it, nor should you. It's wrestling. You work together to put on a show. He felt like he took it the wrong way. He felt that he exposed the business with his ineptitude. Meanwhile, I bet you nobody noticed anything because a quick kick goes by, you take a bump, it's not on TV, who cares? He cared. I found him in the back doing hack squats, like Hindu squats, where you just go up and down, 1, 2. And I go, what's wrong? He's like, oh, I messed up that kick and, I have to do squats now. I'm like, why? Who told you to do squats? Like, are you in trouble? Like, no, I'm just doing them on my own. I screwed up. I'm doing 500 squats. That was him. It's like he had to purge himself and punish himself for making this minor mistake that to him was everything. And Eddie was like that too.
Wrestling fans, of course, all know who Eddie Guerrero is. To many in the wrestling world, he's considered as one of the absolute best wrestlers of all time. I'm Chavo Guerrero Jr., third-generation professional wrestler from the legendary Guerrero family. When Eddie was about 18, he started really training for wrestling, started wrestling all over Mexico, and then transitioned into Japan and became one of their top stars and was called Black Tiger.
He was this tall Mexican guy with long hair and cowboy boots and pants that were tight, and I loved his ass, and I thought he was the most gorgeous guy. My name is Vicky Guerrero. I am a former WWE superstar, and I fell in love with Eddie. He loved wrestling. He ate it, he dreamt it. He was always doing promos in the bathroom mirror. He was always showing me, hey, can I try this move on you and tell me if it hurts? Those were kind of fun days in the bed. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, those were good times.
Super nice, very friendly, would give you the shirt off his back, like literally, like you could just tell the sweetness just exuded from this guy. A little bit crazy, as any wrestler can be, especially from that generation. Very small, though. When we were in Japan, the referee, Hattori, used to call him the Mexican flamingo. Big upper body, small leg.
I think Chris and Eddie first met in Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
They would beat the shit out of each other, almost like they owed each other a lot of money.
Eddie would call me and be like, man, I can't stand this asshole. Like, he's such a prick, and, I can't believe I have to work with him for the next week or two.
I think even in today's world of wrestling, every company out there, they all go back and watch those matches. Those guys were like way ahead of the time.
I really wanted to be like those guys, that's why my name was Lionheart for so long. Because I wanted to be an animal like those guys. Eddie was Black Tiger. Chris was Pegasus Kid, Wild Pegasus. Those two just saw things differently. And that was part of what made them so great.
The more they fought, I think the more that they started, respecting each other. They hit it off, and they ended up just, being the best of friends.
These particular earrings are a pair that my sister wore as woman on WCW. I decided that I would wear what she thought would look good on camera. My name is Sandra Toffaloni, and I am the only sibling of Nancy Benoit. My sister Nancy was married right out of high school. Her first husband was a huge wrestling fan and got her to going to the matches, and she really liked it. There was a moment where, I don't know if it was a promoter or another manager that picked her out of the crowd. She's a beautiful woman. The first time it was just kind of like a weekend thing, and then it turned into something else. She met Kevin Sullivan in Florida Championship Wrestling.
Hey, let me tell you something.
He's probably one of the greatest promoters and bookers that's ever worked in wrestling.
Kevin Sullivan, who was this satanic character, and he was satanic because he shaved an X into his chest hair and put makeup on, That was about the extent of his Satanism, you know. He would wear a hood.
And they had an instant connection as friends, and then not shortly after that, were falling in love. She was already in the process of divorcing her first husband. So Kevin, he had this idea in his head to grow this gimmick of he's the Prince of Darkness, and he has this army of darkness behind him, and Nancy by his side as the fallen angel.
Welcome to Polynesian Pro Wrestling. I'm Angel, your co-host, and here's my master, Kevin Sullivan.
You know, Angel, you've done a fine job.
The name Fallen Angel came from the Uriah Heep album, and the cover of it had this beautiful woman in a leatherish bikini with feathers and a sword, and she looked at that cover and said, man, that's the gimmick.
She was good at what she did. Probably one of the first that really understood the art of being a valet or second, so to speak. She's an instrumental part in getting heat, as we like to say.
People would stop her. They recognized her. They believed she was possessed. She'd be getting gas, and they would come over and like, we're just gonna lay hands on you and pray for your soul. And she loved it because she knew if they hate me, I'm absolutely doing my job.
Because she wasn't a wrestler, but she was very valuable as a ringside performer. And that's a lost art. Now, there's no such thing, right? Every girl in the business has to be a wrestler. She wasn't that, but she probably knew the business better than most.
She did Kevin's makeup, she did her own makeup, she did everything, the hair, the staging, the clothes. Guys would break their tights. Nancy would be there with thread and needle. We had duffel bags full of boa constrictors all around the house.
In the beginning, how would you describe their dynamic, like what they saw like in each other, do you think?
Nancy and Kevin's?
Yeah.
Oh, man. You know, he worshiped her, and she was all in with him. She was in love, and their dynamic was awesome. So they moved to WCW. It was a big step up, obviously, so, from what they were doing.
WCW, where the big boys play.
Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero were the three amigos. All three of them came to WCW together.
What did they call this guy up north, the Canadian Crippler? Oh, my goodness! Did you see that?
Kevin was a booker at the time, booking productions, booking talent for storylines. Everyone kept talking about this really great technical wrestler that was coming out. I knew he was new to the company, and I know that my brother-in-law wanted to book him.
I just knew Nancy is the fallen angel character. Then getting to WCW, she was woman.
I am woman. So men, look at it, wish you had it, and eat your heart out.
Woman was the one character she was attached to because it was most like her actual personality.
I'm gonna watch your every move, Ric Flair. I'll see you at the Clash, big boy.
She's independent, she takes nothing from anyone, and gotta help you if you get in her way.
Oh, this one's for you. Whoa!
I know Kevin really liked Chris, really enjoyed working with him. And at that time, Kevin was booking Chris and himself into matches, and Nancy kind of became a part of it. Things were kind of happening a little weird, but nobody really knew what was going on.
Kevin Sullivan, it started out as you and I. And then you brought Nancy into it?
The joke in the business is that Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce. It's funny to a point, then it's kind of not funny at all, because I'm certain that it was not meant to happen.
Starting in WCW, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, who all came in together, they loved it. They were happy when they were, getting some props, because even them being smaller in a sense, they were the workhorses. You could always count on them.
Benoit takes flight. He is on target with a swan dive.
So Kevin Sullivan, the booker, the story maker, writes the story and has this idea to have woman, who is Nancy, leave Kevin's side and start going with Kevin's arch rival, who is Chris Benoit.
What's it feel like losing the most important thing that you ever had?
WCW would film vignettes with Chris and Nancy being intimate together.
I'll tell you what, it sure feels great gaining it.
What they didn't plan for is that really happened. Nancy left Kevin Sullivan to go with Chris Benoit.
Kevin was used to her always being there and kind of being his right-hand person, and with her focusing on her own career, I think there were strains there. There were a couple of physical altercations in the house, fights that escalated.
Nancy would reach out to Chris whenever she would have a bad night with Kevin, and Chris was her safe haven, you know, where she would go wherever he was at.
Chris was going through problems with his wife at the time, so two people kind of gravitating toward each other because they were, you know, having difficulties.
So I got a call from my husband telling me that Nancy has had some problems and could I help her? I was working in a psychiatrist's office, and Chris brought her in to see me, and she came in and removed her sunglasses, and she had a huge black eye. She told me Kevin had done that to her, and I just told her that I'm help you in any way we can. We need to document this. I was really hoping to try to help her get out of that abusive relationship. I just saw it as being this gonna blow up.
Bash at the Beach was in Daytona Beach at the Ocean Center. It was Kevin Sullivan going against Chris. It was a great match, I thought, because it looked super realistic. And then at one point, Chris and Kevin really started exchanging blows. Chris hit Kevin really hard on the side of the head, and it broke his eardrum. The match ended, but the fight continued backstage. And I was called out to go backstage. I started to walk towards Kevin, and Chris was like, no, don't do that. And Kevin's yelling from the other end of the hallway, come on, come with me, we're leaving. Chris handed me the phone, and it was my sister on the other end. She's like, Sandra, get out of there, come home, come to the condo. Just go with Chris, do not go with Kevin. And I always do what my sister says, so that's what I did. No explanation needed. I went to the condo. My sister came out to talk to me, and she was visibly physically hurt. She explained to me that her injuries were from Kevin, and that Chris had helped her, and that she was leaving Kevin. I told her she had to. Chris was a nice person, and all I knew about him was that he helped my sister in a time that she really needed it. So for that, he instantly had my thanks and my admiration. And she was in love, more in love than I'd ever seen her in my life.
The way they looked at each other, we're like, oh yeah, it's gonna work. And Nancy and I became best of friends.
Chris decided that he wanted to push his career forward a little bit. And then she just really wanted to focus on building the house and starting a family. And then all of a sudden, Daniel was born. I've never seen Chris so beyond himself, just excited.
This is my favorite page because this was during Chris and Nancy's wedding, and Daniel was the best man, of course. This is the love that Chris and Nancy always had. And then here's them feeding Daniel after they got married. And Nancy being the princess that she was. And David was there too, Chris's oldest.
David is the son of Chris Benoit from Chris's first marriage.
Nancy, she treated me like I was her own kid. We didn't use the word step in our family, you know. We were family. We went and had fun, went to Chuck E. Cheese with Daniel and Nancy, and, you know, it was good times.
This is my very favorite photo of David and Daniel. It's flippin' adorable. I mean, that's what siblings are. You hang on to one another and hope for the best for each other.
He looked up to me, you know? I loved him. I protected him. We wanted to be tag team champions. That's what we wanted to do. Be the tag team champions of the world together.
So in WCW, there was definitely a ceiling that you would reach.
The bigger guys were getting all the TV spotlights. If you weren't like 7 foot tall and huge muscles, you know, you didn't get the main event.
Chris was getting a little irritated about the situation happening at WCW at the time and never seeing ourselves in a main event spot because we kept getting pushed down. So we decided to take a walk.
I cannot believe this. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko on WWF Raw.
They walked out. WWF picked them up in 1 second, and the rest is history.
When all three of them got to WWE, then you really saw the strengths.
I lie, I cheat, I steal!
Their intelligence for the business and their view of the business and seeing, like, we see this, they saw this. Eddie became one of the best characters of all time, as well as being one of the best in-ring champions. And Benoit became just this killer, you know, no-nonsense Clint Eastwood performer. It was like Dirty Harry. Go ahead, make my day.
Benoit, he's a rabid Wolverine. I'm telling you, Chris Benoit is heartless.
Chris Benoit's been a main eventer for years. It was only the matter that he was too short. Perceived as too short. Imagine that.
Benoit's a magnificent, extraordinary athlete.
I always thought, man, getting Benoit here, it's going to create these great matchups, and it did. It was a no-brainer.
But also, Chris was always very much a great father, you know, very much about his family. His kids were always high up on his list.
When Daniel got a little older, Chris would bring him to the ring. And of course, anytime when Chris brought the kids around, we'd all play with them.
It really pained him when he had to miss certain things. I remember at one point, I said something along the lines of, like, I gotta be home on Halloween. And he's like, oh man, I wish I could go home for Halloween, but I gotta work. And I miss Father's Day too. And like, I was like, dude, we'll just get those days off. And it's almost like he didn't want to ask for days off because, you know, sacrificing for his art, I guess you would say. And there's a similarity between Chris and Eddie in that both of them sacrificed a lot for their art. Chris and Eddie basically gave their life for pro wrestling.
For Eddie, wrestling was everything. God was first, and then family and wrestling were a close second.
You know, sometimes we'd be in the locker room and Eddie's naked in the locker room reading scripture to other wrestlers and telling them about God.
Chris wasn't religious at all, and Eddie was the one that started introducing him about God. And Chris was very receptive, and he always listened to Eddie. And Eddie had even given him a Bible one Christmas. And Chris always had that on him, and that was something that meant a lot to Eddie. To always be a witness to Chris, you know, and to help him try to find his higher power.
Chris was very quiet, very reserved, and it took a while for him to trust somebody.
Eddie would be his go-to guide. He'd go and talk to him about certain things, you know, whether it be marriage problems or family or professional problems. They'd always confide in each other, and that's what their friendship was. And I know that Chris didn't have that with a lot of people.
Chris, he was blowing up. He was getting bigger as a wrestler. And to have Nancy behind him, he was really happy. She was the driving force and motivation, sort of taking care of everything else that wasn't related to wrestling. She wanted him to be happy and to be successful and to be with his best friend.
Eddie was injured a lot. He had a lot of pain, a lot of injuries that, you know, he couldn't get operations for.
Eddie Guerrero is legal. Flash, caught it. It could be over.
And as a wrestler, you never say that you need time off, because as soon as you're off TV for 4 or 6 months, you know, someone else is going to come and replace you. And that was something that was always in Eddie's mind, you know. I was like, I can't stop now.
King, I think Eddie Guerrero is seriously hurt.
Everything he did was wrestling, even to the point where I know he was in a lot of pain, but he still wanted to wrestle. That's what he does. That's what he did. That's who he was. And there was also a lot of, I mean, let's be honest, we're all adults here. We all did the same shit. There's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of drugs.
But the more that Eddie was trying to hide his injuries with the drugs and the alcohol, it was just getting into a downward spiral.
You know, I saw Chris several different times and make sure that Eddie was tucked in bed okay, you know, and put on his side so he wouldn't throw up on himself. But then Eddie started getting DUIs, and crashing his car, and, you know, having overdose problems.
There was 3 ODs that Eddie did in our house. The first 2, I called the ambulance. And all they did was release him the next afternoon. They just sent him home. The 3rd time, I just let him lay there. I actually left and took the girls to school and just told God, if you're gonna take him, just take him now, because it was a bad place in my life.
A lot of wrestlers were dying from substance abuse issues, and in the back of your mind, always, you're like, man, is Eddie gonna be one of those? Is he gonna be a statistic?
Eddie showed up to work high one day where he was in bad shape, and I think that when they saw that and Eddie couldn't perform, that's when they said, we're gonna go ahead and let you go. He called me and said, well, I got fired. I finally was like, oh, well, thank God. I mean, because now the worst that could ever be imagined is happening.
They sent him to rehab, lost everything, and had to go from the depths of hell and work his way up the system again.
Little by little, he started changing his life to get clean.
After that, his wife came back, his family came back, his life came back.
And that's where Eddie got rehired from WWE, and things were great. He was in the best shape.
WrestleMania 20, the fans knew the history of Eddie and Chris. So the night in New York, it's the right time for both of these guys.
Me and Nancy were watching from the skybox. We were jittery and we were nervous and we were excited and we were stressed too, because we didn't know, if they were gonna win or what the outcome was.
Just happened. Wait a minute. The boot went flying. Boot came off. Look at this. Swap package. 1, 2, 3.
When Eddie won, it was pure joy.
Benoit going up to the top.
See my dad in the ring? He was my hero. I remember it like yesterday, man. Jumped up after he won the belt.
Nancy and I were crying and the girls were excited. And of course you see the confetti and all the fans just on their feet.
And then I got to see Eddie Guerrero go out there, best friend. What a moment. I'll never forget that.
And that's why that's one of the best moments in not just wrestling history, I think TV history. It was the happy storybook ending of WrestleMania.
Thank God the office finally saw those guys for what they were.
It was my favorite time, my favorite match. I wish those 2 just retired right after that, to be honest with you.
I have never, ever seen a closer relationship or friendship between 2 wrestlers as I did between Chris and Eddie. It was an actual, real, no bullshit, out of the ring, caring relationship.
So there's a super show in Minneapolis. We got a flight to Minneapolis. It's a few hours, so Eddie's sitting there talking to me, and then he kind of passes out, sleeps, and I'm like, well, I didn't know that this had been happening to Eddie. He started talking to people and passed out in the middle of a sentence. So we get off the plane in Minneapolis, check into our hotel that we always go to, and we had seen Chris in the lobby also. Say, I'll see you down in the morning. Okay. 7 o'clock, and we're gonna go work out. It's set. 3 of us together, this is the way it was. Eddie goes to his room, I go to my room. Next morning, I get a call about 5:30. It's the front desk. Something's wrong with your uncle. Something's wrong with my uncle. So I get a knock on my door, security guard, and he's taking me into Eddie's room. I go, what's going on? He goes, well, your uncle didn't answer his wake-up call. So we came to his room and knocked, no answer. With the latch on, that means someone's in here. So they cut the latch off. I walk in and I look in the bathroom and I see Eddie face down. He's in his underwear, his toothbrush was in his hand. I grab him, I kind of try to shake him, and he's moving, and I hear him gurgling, like. And I'm like, Eddie, Eddie, wiping his face, and he's like, he's still there, man, and we're trying, and then all of a sudden, he's in my arms, and he's not there anymore. He passed in my arms, like literally. Hold on. I haven't been to this moment in a long time. Then I get a call from Chris, and Chris goes, "Hey man, I'm downstairs, where are you? Hey man, are you sitting down?" He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Eddie passed away this morning." And all you hear is, from a guy with no emotion whatsoever, you hear a wail. Just this wail from deep down, like a heartbreak. If you've ever heard one, this was a heartbreaking.
Then Vince called me, and he said, he goes, "Vicky," and he's just crying. I'm just like, I go, "Is it true? Eddie's passed away." He said, "I'm sorry."
Chris went over there and kind of knelt down and kissed Eddie on the forehead. I went over there and, kind of like the same thing. And it was hard. I mean, here's your buddy that you've been with for 8, 10 years, every day pretty much.
And there wasn't really any sign that obviously he had relapsed.
He didn't relapse. The verdict was heart disease at 38.
I remember the day that my sister called me hysterical. I couldn't even understand her. You need to take some breaths and you need to tell me what's going on. She couldn't even get the words out. And when she told me, I burst into tears. And I thought about the kids, and Vicky really, just a flash in my head. And then my next thought was, oh my God, Chris.
Eddie Guerrero has passed away.
The tribute the WWE did couldn't have been any better. Yeah, the whole stage was filled with everyone from backstage, but all I can remember was Chris. He was just crying.
Now I know that I love you. I miss you.
One by one, they took different talent that wanted to talk about Eddie, Eddie's passing, Eddie's life. And Chris did it, which is probably really difficult to do. Chris had a hard time getting through it.
I want to thank you from my heart and tell you that I love you and I'll never forget you. And I will see each other again. I love you, Eddie.
I believe it was very hard for him, I even cried after for him.
Funerals are never good, but Eddie's funeral was very hard. When I saw Benoit, he came and gave me a hug, but it was like the most desperate, saddest, I'm hanging on for dear life hug that you could ever get. Sobbing, deep, hitching sobs, and leaving literally a patch of wetness on the shoulder of my suit that soaked through to the shirt, went through the jacket and the shirt of tears.
I'd never seen Chris show emotion before. Of course it affected all of us, but I just think it affected Chris just like so much more. It affected Chris like a spouse or something.
When Eddie passed away, not only did it end Chris and Eddie's relationship, in a lot of ways it kind of ended mine with him too. I think he just became more and more of a hermit and didn't want to see people that he knew. I remember seeing him at Eddie's funeral, and the WWE guys had to leave right after the funeral to fly to Europe. You have Chris who has this horrible damage done to him, where he's crying, sobbing, the lowest point of his life, and as soon as the funeral's done, he goes on a plane and flies to Europe to wrestle. I didn't get that. I thought if there's ever a time to take some time off, or to give someone some time off. I think Chris needed to be away from stuff for a while, but I think he just continued on because he didn't know what else to do. He didn't handle it well. Let me just say it like that.
I was in bed like for the first week after we buried Eddie, and Nancy was the first one at the house, and she helped me with everything. I mean, she was the one who was making sure that the kids were fed. And finally, she just like walked in my room and she's like, enough. She goes, enough. Get up and shower. Get up because you have 2 girls that still love you and they need you. And I didn't want to do anything. And she threw me in the shower. She got the girls dressed and she goes, we're going to lunch. She was my angel in so many ways.
She just immediately went into planning mode. I'm gonna help with this and I'm gonna do that. And I mean, that was her knee-jerk reaction to grief and heartache. But Chris locked down.
And Nancy stayed with me for a month after Eddie passed away. And Chris would come in when they were off, and I would find Chris on Eddie's side of his bed. And Chris would just be laying there crying, holding Eddie's pillow. Eddie had a beautiful gym upstairs, and I would go upstairs and the girls would come down and they would say, Mom, Chris is crying again. And I would go to the gym and Chris would just be sitting on the bench just crying. He goes, I'm lost without Eddie being here. To see him just crying in my arms, it was very emotional. Here's this big, strong man who is tough and quiet and strong. He broke my heart. You know, but then you see Chris, you know, around the other wrestlers or in a meeting, and he had his face on. So professional, like you wouldn't even think that anything was bothering him. But Chris was getting more and more distant, where he was not being seen as much backstage, you know, where I couldn't find him. Like Nancy would call me and be like, how's Chris doing today? And I said, well, I haven't seen him.
She talked to me about it several times. She was like, there's something going on, and I don't know what it is. You gotta tell me if you notice something. And I was like, yeah, there's something up. He just seemed different. He was talking more about other wrestlers that had had children kidnapped and fans that went sideways and were violent. He used to take different cars and different ways to the gym that we had been going to for years. It was super random. He just didn't want to be places and be seen. There was a level of paranoia we had never, ever seen before.
Nancy started getting really worried. She's like, I'm really worried for Chris. This is really affecting him in so many ways. He was just sad all the time and depressed. He was impatient. There was a lot of fighting going on for reasons that she didn't understand why he would be upset. And she would just be like, life is just really hard right now. Like, Chris is just irritable and he doesn't want to talk to me. He's mad all the time. You know, he was just mad at life in general.
There were a few months where he completely closed off, not really even talking to Nancy, not really talking to anyone. So we got Chris a journal so that he could write to Eddie. I think that after we got him that journal is when he started opening up a little bit more, because writing to him, he started feeling like maybe Eddie was with him in spirit or in heart by just being able to talk to him every day.
Was there any point when Nancy wanted Chris to maybe step away from wrestling at all?
That last year, she didn't think that it was healthy physically or mentally for him to be on the road and doing so much work in the same places that he and his best friend used to be and do things together.
I remember talking to him and he's like, every building I go to, all I can do is think of Eddie. Okay, we're in Kansas City. Last time I was here, Eddie was here. And now we're in New Mexico. Last time I was here, Eddie was here. I think all of those things were kind of signs that something really serious was going on with him.
He was so grief-stricken on a monumental level that she thought that staying in the company and staying in the business was going to eventually harm his well-being.
It's Saturday night. We're gonna go into Laredo, Texas. We're doing the Texas Loop. I get to Laredo, and Chris, myself, and Scott Armstrong are gonna ride together. And then later I get a call from Chris, and he goes, oh man, I'm not gonna make it. I go, what's wrong? He goes, Daniel and Nancy have food poisoning, and I'm just trying to take care of him. And I'm like, oh, man, are you good? You all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay. I said, well, tomorrow we're in Houston for the pay-per-view. So he goes, okay, great. I said, okay, man. And he goes, Chavo. I go, yeah? And he goes, I love you. And I'm like, okay, brother, I love you too, man. That was weird. And I go, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm okay, man. I'm just really tired. And I said, okay, man. Okay, well, you can call me if you need to get any problem. Okay, well, I will. So then, that's it. About 5:30 in the morning, I get a text, and it was from Chris's phone. And it said, the dogs are in the enclosed pool area, and the back door is open. So I'm half asleep, and I see this text, and I'm like, the heck is that? All of a sudden, 30 seconds later, I get another text from Nancy's phone, and it says the exact same thing. I was like, that's weird. I get another text right afterwards. It tells me his physical address. What is that? So I disregarded, thinking I'm picking Chris up in 3 hours at the airport. So then, I meet Scott downstairs. We go get breakfast, and I talk to him. I go, hey, man, did you get a weird text from Chris? And he goes, yeah, I did. I said, what did it say? And he said the exact same thing. We drive to Corpus Christi for the next show. Still no word from Chris. So the head of talent relations, Johnny Ace, asked me, hey, Chavo, have you heard from Chris? And I said, no. I said, but look, Johnny, and I bring up my phone and I show him. These are the texts that I got from Chris yesterday. And Johnny, in his raspy voice, is like, Chavo, why didn't you show us these yesterday? And I'm like, look, man, we were covering for Chris. We didn't know where he was. You didn't know where he was.
The office starting to get concerned because it was getting to be like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Vince McMahon has sent a wellness check to his house.
My name is Dennis Fagan. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is missing. We need a welfare check done.
And what's his name?
Chris Benoit. It's spelled B-E-N-O-I-T.
Okay, and he's a wrestler?
So Vince McMahon calls a meeting at the ring.
Dean Malenko's sitting next to me. I just had this really bad feeling. Dean's like, there's something wrong. Something is not right.
That's when Vince McMahon stands up in the ring and says, we've just got word that Chris Benoit, Nancy, and Daniel have all passed away. And the gasps, of course, around the ring.
I remember Vicky, because she just let out this hurling scream.
I freaked out and I started crying, and Dean kind of stood up and he grabbed my hand and he took me off to the back.
So then Vince is backstage and I walk up to Vince and I said, what happened? What happened? And I'm a little frantic. And he says, they're gone. I said, what do you mean they're gone? And he hugs me super tight. And my head's on his shoulder, like crying to Vince, like, no, like, what happened? I don't understand. Nobody understood because no one knew the details yet.
I didn't know what was going on, but I'd heard enough to know that something's not right. If you would have lined up 100 people against the wall and said, name one that's gonna kill his family, how can this be? Like, how could he have done this? He fooled us all.
I went from just being a regular welfare check. Okay, we got something more serious here.
And I came out of the theater and I turned my phone on and I had like 22 missed calls from my parents.
The cop told me that they all passed away over the weekend.
You didn't want to believe it. Can't believe it. Can't be true. But it was.
The act of what he did is unthinkable, unforgivable.
Of physical traces of what had transpired. Such an attempt at concealment, far from absolving suspicion, only intensified it, pointing toward a guilty party aware of their transgression and attempting to evade accountability. This is a classic indicator of a criminal's awareness of guilt, a panicked attempt to literally wash away the evidence of a horrific act. To a detective, such an attempt at cleaning up a scene often reveals more than it conceals, suggesting a perpetrator who understands the incriminating nature of blood but lacks the sophistication to truly erase all forensic traces, microscopic remnants, diluted stains and cracks and crevices, and residue patterns often remain, providing invaluable clues to trained eyes and sophisticated forensic tools. The meticulous examination of the vehicle continued to yield disturbing findings, solidifying the Grimm hypothesis. The observation of blood spattering on the back windshield painted an even more vivid and violent picture. Spatter patterns are a critical component of forensic analysis, often revealing the nature, direction, and force of an impact event. On a back windshield, such spattering could suggest a forceful event occurring inside the vehicle or directly behind it, perhaps indicative of a gunshot or a blunt force trauma. This is distinct from a mere blood stain. Spatter implies dynamic force, an event that propelled blood outwards from a source, often providing a terrifying window into mechanics of the violence. It suggested that a significant, violent act had taken place within the close confines of the vehicle's interior or immediately adjacent to its rear, with a trajectory that sent droplets of blood arching onto the rear glass. This detail, combined with the signs of a cleanup, suggested a rapid, traumatic sequence of events that left behind undeniable signatures of violence, pushing the investigative team to the realization that Carson had almost certainly met with foul play. These forensic clues became silent witnesses, articulating a narrative of struggle and brutality that mere absence alone could not convey. The geographical context of this emerging tragedy added yet another layer of difficulty to the burgeoning investigation. The area where Carson's activities had seemingly culminated was deeply rural, a vast expanse of unyielding terrain that presented formidable challenges to search efforts. In such a remote area, locating a body is a nearly impossible task. This reality is one that confronts law enforcement in countless jurisdictions across vast, undeveloped landscapes. The sheer scale of such regions, combined with dense natural concealment like forests, undergrowth, and numerous secluded tracts, can turn a body recovery operation into an exercise in Sisyphean futility, demanding immense resources and often relying on fortuitous discoveries or exceptional investigative persistence. The landscape itself, therefore, becomes a tacit accomplice, providing ideal cover for those who commit heinous acts. The specific geography in question was further detailed. There's actually hundreds of overall sites in the very rural areas of Jefferson Davis County. These well sites, likely referring to oil and natural gas drilling locations, are typically isolated, reached by unpaved, often overgrown roads, and usually surrounded by dense vegetation, making them perfect candidates for concealment. They are off the beaten path, not regularly patrolled or observed, and frequented primarily by those with specific work-related reasons to be there. This isolation, sadly, is often recognized and exploited by those with nefarious intentions, providing both seclusion for the commission of crime and an ideal, unobserved resting place for evidence. The inherent seclusion of these locations was explicitly noted. They're very secluded to be a good place to commit a crime, and possibly there could be a dead body laying close to one of these well sites. This observation, chilling in its pragmatic assessment, framed the immense task confronting the investigators to navigate a labyrinth of remote, identical-looking locales in pursuit of a missing young man, now increasingly feared to be a homicide victim. The vastness and sameness of these sites, each one a potential unmarked grave, serve as a stark reminder of the challenges ahead for the dedicated men and women of law enforcement. As the narrative developed, the investigative forces, with a blend of professional resolve and an inherent sense of justice, began to follow the nascent trail of evidence. Their methodical pursuit, fueled by both logical deduction and a commitment to the victim, ultimately led them to a profoundly disturbing conclusion, a revelation that exposed a deeply sinister and manipulative plot. But when investigators follow the trail of evidence, it leads to a catfishing killer. This term, catfishing, has become an unfortunate staple in modern parlance, denoting the creation of a fake online identity to lure someone into a relationship or situation. It's a cruel deception that plays on human emotions and trust. In this instance, however, the deceit transcended mere emotional manipulation, ascending to a truly malevolent and murderous level, a calculated, lethal deception that exploited Carson's innocent desire for connection and adventure. The underlying motive and mechanism of this tragedy were then succinctly encapsulated. This is a case about a young man who met a girl and wanted an adventure, but it turns out that the girl had a sinister motive. This stark juxtaposition between youthful desire for experience and an inherent malevolence forms. The tragic core of the story, a reminder of innocence exploited and trust betrayed. Carson, an open-hearted young man, was simply looking for a novel experience, perhaps a fleeting romantic connection, or simply an interesting outing that promised a bit of excitement on a quiet Labor Day weekend. He approached this encounter with a degree of trust, as most people do when meeting online. His desire for adventure was a healthy, human yearning for life experiences, tragically repurposed by his aggressor for a deadly agenda. The psychological weight of this predatory act was further emphasized, highlighting the sheer depravity of the perpetrator's actions. She lured this young gentleman. I mean, what normal person would even think to do that? This rhetorical question perfectly captures the disbelief and moral outrage that such an act elicits, challenging the very notion of human decency and empathy. It speaks to the utter abnormality of a mind that could conceive of such a cold-blooded and calculated betrayal, reducing another human being to a mere means to an end, a disposable pawn in a self-serving scheme. This sentiment underscores the criminal's profound lack of empathy, a hallmark of severe psychopathy or antisocial personality traits, where the welfare and inherent value of another person are utterly disregarded in pursuit of selfish desires. Critical to breaking through the web of deceit were technological aids and a relentless pursuit of verifiable facts. The mundane recording of a surveillance camera, often overlooked in daily life, became a pivotal piece of the puzzle, providing an objective and irrefutable timeline. The video footage was captured on Sunday, and lo and behold, there it is. He's driving the truck. This visual confirmation, date-stamped and irrefutable, provided the last known sighting of Carson and his vehicle, anchoring the timeline of events with the kind of hard, incontrovertible evidence that every detective craves. It showed Carson, alive, driving his beloved Ford Raptor, seemingly in control of his destination. However, even with such clarity, the investigative path remained fraught with uncertainty and the need for rigorous analysis. The initial encounter with the vehicle and its occupants necessitated a broad, cautious approach, a fundamental principle of criminal investigation to ensure no lead is prematurely dismissed and no stone left unturned. Everybody is considered suspect at that time. This reflects a fundamental principle of criminal investigation. Cast a wide net, gather all potential information, and then systematically narrow the focus as evidence emerges. It means that the deputy arriving on scene with Carson's truck had to consider every individual, present as potentially complicit, or at least privy to crucial information, until their role could be definitively clarified or excluded. This methodical process helps avoid premature conclusions and ensures a thorough examination of all possibilities. Yet, even in the midst of the systematic sifting, a perplexing question arose, one that hinted at a deeper, more complex conspiracy or an extraordinary feat of individual brutality. How could she do it by herself? This lingering query would continue to shadow the investigation, a testament to the sheer physical disparity between the slight suspect and the imposing victim. It was a question that would plague investigators for some time, challenging the immediate assumptions about a sole perpetrator, forcing them to search for evidence of an accomplice, however unlikely. The official narrative began to solidify with a precise date and location, grounding the unfolding tragedy in reality. September 6, 2022. It's a Tuesday morning in the small town of Pearl, Mississippi, when Darlene's sister-uncle arrives at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department to report her son Carson missing. This timestamp marks the formal initiation of the search. The moment personal anguish becomes a public plea for assistance, moving the private terror of a mother into the realm of official inquiry. The sheer dread Darlene felt, a mother's inherent protective instinct operating at its highest alarm, impelled her to take the concrete steps of reporting a missing person. She reported to the authorities the last time she and other family members had seen Carson, providing the initial, critical timeline. Darlene reported that they last saw Carson on the afternoon of Sunday, September 4. This detail provided the crucial window of time for investigators to focus their initial inquiries. The significance of the holiday weekend was not lost on investigators, as such periods often account for temporary disconnections from routine or family check-ins, sometimes delaying the recognition of a true emergency, and this was Labor Day weekend. This holiday context, while seemingly innocuous, often creates natural alibis or explanations for delayed communication that, in retrospect, can make a nefarious act more difficult to detect initially. During that particular weekend, Darlene herself had been away. That particular weekend, I left with some friends to go to Texas to this wedding. Carson, characteristic of a young man enjoying a break, had offered a vague but not immediately alarming explanation for his outing to his father. His father's memory provided a partial account. He just told his dad he was just going out. Crucially, the destination and company remained undisclosed, adding an immediate layer of ambiguity and difficulty for anyone trying to trace his steps. He didn't say where he was going or who he was meeting or anything. The father's parting words, imbued with typical paternal care, were a poignant memory in the wake of the disappearance, a haunting echo of normalcy before the unthinkable. He said, "Well, I love you. Be careful." These tender words, spoken in the ordinary course of Sunday, would later echo with agonizing significance for a family desperately trying to recall every last detail of their final interactions. The initial absence on Monday morning, a holiday, was absorbed into the casual rhythm of a long weekend. Monday morning, his dad got up and went on to work like normal, and he didn't really pay attention that Carson's truck was not there. In a bustling household, especially one during a holiday, such a detail might easily be overlooked. Teenagers and young adults often have fluid schedules, especially on a day off, and the absence of a vehicle might simply imply a late-night return or an early morning departure. For a friend's house, it wasn't until Darlene's return later in the evening that the unease began to coalesce into genuine concern. I got back in Monday evening after Labor Day. Darlene, with the keen awareness that often defines maternal vigilance, soon felt a distinct chill of worry. Carson's consistent pattern of checking in, a behavioral hallmark of his consideration for others, was conspicuously absent. Darlene says that when Carson still hadn't checked in by that evening, she started to get concerned. This was the tipping point, the moment when routine absence morphed into something more sinister in a mother's heart, a slow-burning realization that something was deeply amiss. The transition from concern to active worry, and then to a frantic search for information, escalated rapidly as Tuesday dawned. Darlene, unable to quell her growing anxiety, acted decisively. I waited till about 7:30 a.m. and I texted him. I said, "Are you on your way back home?" and didn't get a response. The silent phone, usually a lifeline, now became an ominous void. Each unanswered message a punch to the gut. I called and there was no answer. It went to voicemail. This series of unanswered communications only intensified Darlene's burgeoning dread, pushing her further into a sleepless vigil the night before. So, of course, I was up all night long. The dark hours, amplified by worry, were agonizing, a silent torture of unknown possibilities. The Monday absence could be explained by the holiday. Indeed, because it was a Labor Day weekend, Carson did not work on Monday. The Tuesday absence from work, however, was inarguable evidence of profound deviation from Carson's responsible nature, something far more serious than a simple holiday extension. Tuesday, Carson was supposed to be at work, so I called his friend that he worked with. He said, "Carson is not here." This professional absence cemented the family's gravest fears, transforming a personal worry into an urgent community concern. Carson's failure to show up for work was not merely an inconvenience. It was a blaring alarm bell, signaling genuine distress or incapacitation, an act entirely antithetical to his character and work ethic. In a proactive and astute move, Darlene initiated a critical line of inquiry, accessing resources that could provide concrete data points. Darlene tells the deputies that she contacted Carson's bank to see if he'd recently used his debit card. This step, common in missing person cases, provides a financial footprint, often revealing a person's last known location or activity. A digital trail that criminals often overlook or assume is inconsequential. Darlene, as an authorized user, had access to this vital information. They know that I'm on Carson's account. I just told them, "Look, can you look back on the transaction that Carson has made from yesterday?" The bank's response provided the first verifiable lead, a crucial geographic anchor in an otherwise amorphous disappearance, painting a much-needed dot on the map. And they said, "Yeah, here's one for gas at New Hebron gas station." The name of the town, New Hebron, resonated with unfamiliarity for Darlene, adding another layer of disquiet and deepening the mystery around Carson's presence there. We hung up, and I said, in my mind, "We don't know anybody from New Hebron." This isolation, this lack of any personal connection to the specified location, amplified the unsettling mystery surrounding Carson's movements, immediately raising questions about why he would be there. New Hebron as a location was starkly described, highlighting its remoteness. New Hebron is a tiny rural community located 51 miles south of Pearl. This geographical distance meant Carson was far from his usual haunts, deep in unfamiliar territory. The transaction's timing also provided a critical data point. Bank records show the withdrawal occurred around 8:30 p.m. Sunday night, a few hours after Carson was last seen. This solidified the timeline, creating a crucial window of action and raising questions about Carson's activities during those vital hours immediately following his last known sighting. With this new, unsettling information in hand, Darlene knew the time for waiting had passed, and decisive action was required. That's when Darlene decided it was time to contact authorities. The convergence of an unexplained absence, unusual silence, and an unexpected geographical location signaled that a professional investigation was no longer just prudent, but absolutely necessary. As Darlene arrived at the sheriff's office, preparing to make her formal report, a crucial piece of information resurfaced in her memory, a detail Carson had shared that could potentially shed light on his mysterious Sunday evening plans. But by the time she arrived at the sheriff's office, she remembered something. Carson had met a girl on Snapchat. This online connection, previously mentioned almost as an aside in casual conversation, now took on immediate, profound relevance, linking his disappearance directly to an unknown, digitally forged encounter. Darlene recalled her prior conversation with her son, confirming the existence of this online acquaintance. Carson had told me that he had met a girl on Snapchat, and I said, "Oh, okay." Carson's openness about having met this person physically also came to mind, adding another layer to the interaction's reality. And he had told me, he said that he had met her a couple of times. But the crucial, lingering gap in information remained, the absence of any familiarity with this individual, which had always been a quiet source of concern for Darlene. I didn't know her. This lack of a personal connection, of any social validation of the new girl in Carson's life, suddenly felt chillingly significant. Law enforcement, faced with a missing adult, employs a systematic, phased approach to distinguish between a voluntary absence and a genuine emergency. Police need to try to ascertain some information. The primary goal in the initial hours of such a report is to differentiate between an intentional withdrawal from contact and a situation where genuine help is needed, to separate a willful absence from a tragic inability to communicate. They decided to go off for a few days and just don't want to be contacted, or is it that he needs help? This dichotomy is central to early missing person investigations, guiding the allocation of resources and the level of urgency. For those who knew Carson, however, the answer to this critical question was already tragically clear. His character, his strong sense of family, and his innate responsibility vehemently ruled out a casual disappearance. The community, alerted to his absence and his unusual silence, mobilized in a quiet, collective worry that rapidly escalated. I think it was September 6th is whenever I was told that everyone was kind of looking for Carson. The internal conviction that something truly grievous had befallen him was profound and widely shared, deeply rooted in Carson's fundamental character. Deep down, I knew something was wrong because just the way that Carson is, he would have checked in with somebody. This statement encapsulates a profound impact of a deviation from an individual's established behavioral pattern. Carson's sudden and complete silence was anomalous, defying his inherent sense of responsibility and consideration for his loved ones, especially his mother. The absence of communication, particularly in an era of constant connectivity where smartphones are ubiquitous, was deeply alarming. Obviously, his phone was blowing up, right? You know, everybody's looking for him. He's not getting back with anybody. This digital silence, far from a voluntary withdrawal from the incessant pings and calls, painted a grim picture of someone incapable of responding, a person whose ability to communicate had been forcibly severed. The gnawing unease permeated every fiber of Darlene's being, a relentless, aching dread that whispered of danger. I had a bad gut feeling. This visceral premonition of peril is often an accurate barometer of truth, a psychological echo of the deep, unbreakable bonds of family. In the face of this profound uncertainty and an increasingly bleak outlook, Darlene found solace and strength in an act of deep faith. I just really started praying and just saying, you know, Carson, where are you? Her desperate prayers echoed the collective helplessness felt by a community caught in the horrifying grip of a missing person's mystery, desperate for any sign of their beloved Carson. Carson Monroe Sistrunk, a young man whose life was tragically cut short, was brought into the world on December 16th, 1997, in Flowood, Mississippi. He was the youngest of his siblings, cherished and loved, a tender presence in a bustling family. I had 3 sons, and Carson was the baby of the 3. He was the smallest. This detail about his birth size adds a tender, almost vulnerable layer to the memory of the larger-than-life man he would become, making the eventual crime committed against him all the more stark in its cruelty. His personality, even in youth, was a beacon of light and warmth, leaving an indelible impression on everyone he met. He was bubbly, just a joy, you know, for us. He exuded a vibrant, infectious positivity that drew people to him naturally, a radiating goodness that permeated his entire being. His childhood was marked by a vibrant connection to the natural world, a love for the great outdoors that was nurtured by his family. He loved the outside, and as he grew older, my husband would take him home. This shared passion for the outdoors formed the bedrock of his character and his close relationships, notably with his best friend, Tanner Gray. It built within him a respect for nature and a fondness for simple, genuine pleasures that would define much of his life. Tanner's recollection of Carson was steeped in nostalgia and deep affection, a poignant testament to a bond forged in childhood and strengthened by years of shared experiences. Carson and I grew up together. Our moms were best friends, so it was kind of just, we had to be best friends, you know, and we did everything together. This lifelong bond, forged through familial connections and shared experiences, was truly foundational, a kinship-born proximity and sustained by genuine affection. Their mutual love for the outdoors provided a constant source of shared adventure and countless cherished memories. We loved the outdoors. Tanner painted a vivid picture of their youthful camaraderie, their simple pleasures, and their shared hobbies, which included a practical and responsible approach to firearms, something Carson would later excel in professionally. Whenever we got older, we would house it. Actually, a good bet for one of the guys in our church. And he has a setup out there, like a little range. And Carson and I would get the .22 pistol and shoot the target. These memories of shared recreation underscored Carson's connection to firearms, a detail that would later prove tragically ironic, as it was a firearm that ultimately cut short his promising life. It established Carson's familiarity with guns in a safe, recreational context, far removed from the violence that awaited him. The smallest baby brother had, by his teenage years, blossomed into a formidable physical presence, a man who commanded attention through his sheer stature. Although Carson was born the smallest of his brothers, by the time he was a teenager, he'd become larger than life. His impressive height and considerable build, combined with his kind demeanor, earned him an affectionate nickname, a testament to his gentle nature despite his powerful physique. I think it was kind of a joke that we just nicknamed him Little Man, you know. The ironic humor was clear and universally appreciated. The dude stood at 6'4", right at 300 pounds. I mean, the guy was not a little man. This physical description immediately answers the earlier investigative question that had perplexed law enforcement. How could she do it by herself? It amplified the sheer physical challenge presented by Carson's size, hinting at the desperate and possibly opportunistic nature of the crime, or a cunning method of body disposal. The ability to playfully mock his size, however, was only possible due to his profound gentleness, his inner kindness always shining through his robust exterior. We were able to make that joke with him because he was so tender-hearted. He was a universally loved figure, characterized by a fundamental goodness, an innate empathy that made him approachable and cherished by all who knew him. He was a gentle giant, a teddy bear. His pride in his possessions, particularly his truck, was another defining characteristic, reflecting his hard work and passion. This personal connection to his vehicle added a layer of pathos to the crime that would ultimately be committed, as his cherished possession became the very instrument of the perpetrator's greed. When he graduated and he got his truck, we had Little Man put on the tag. He had a Forward Raptor, and he loved it. You know, he loved the drive. That was his baby. His truck was more than just transportation. It was a symbol of his independence, his accomplishments, and his persona, making its eventual role in his demise all the more tragically significant. After high school, Carson, with a clear sense of purpose and a hands-on aptitude, pursued his vocational passions, building a life founded on skilled craftsmanship and dedication. After graduating high school in 2016, Carson went off to college to pursue his passion. His mechanical aptitude and affinity for intricate work led him down two distinct yet closely related career paths, showcasing his versatility and expertise. Carson went to Decent Mechanic School, a new welder, and he loved it. And then he also transitioned into being a gunsmith. This dual specialization reflected his practical skills, his meticulous nature, and his deep knowledge of mechanics and firearms, fields that often demand precision and a keen eye for detail. His work ethic was exemplary, a testament to his dedication, ambition, and industrious nature, reflecting a young man committed to building a fulfilling career. He would go to work at 7 and work at 3:30 at the welding place, and then leave there and then go to his gunsmith job. This dedication to two distinct vocations highlighted his driven personality and his desire to excel in areas he genuinely loved. His expertise in the latter field, gunsmithing, was extensive and impressive. He would build guns. He set up guns. He knew everything there was to know about a gun, for his friends and family. Witnessing his success and his passion flourish was a source of immense pride and admiration. So it was just cool to see him flourish in what he loved to do. By the age of 24, Carson had seemingly achieved a commendable level of stability and fulfillment, a testament to his hard work, good character, and clear direction in life. By 24, Carson seemed to already have his life figured out. His personal life was also marked by strong foundations, surrounded by supportive relationships. He had great parents. He had great friends. While his romantic relationships had not yet found lasting success, he approached them with a cautious maturity and a degree of guardedness. He had had a few previous relationships that didn't pan out. I think that made him kind of keep his cards close to him. This introspection contributed to a degree of privacy, a tendency not to overshare the intimate details of his life, which would later present a challenge for investigators meticulously piecing together his final moments. He was a very private person. However, this privacy did not extend to inconsiderate disappearances or an unexplained lack of communication, especially with his family. He always communicated his whereabouts and intentions, especially of planning an extended absence, demonstrating his innate thoughtfulness and accountability. He may not say exactly where he was going or what he was doing, but if he's going to be gone for like a weekend or something, he would say, "I'll be back, this day." It was a significant deviation from his established pattern of communication, this unprecedented silence, that galvanized the fears of his loved ones and served as the most terrifying indicator that something truly catastrophic had occurred. Now, Carson's loved ones fear the worst due to his unusual silence. His uncharacteristic withdrawal became an unbearable absence, signaling to all who knew him that his silence was not voluntary, but tragically enforced. The formal investigation, initiated by Darlene Sistrunk's missing person report, honed in with increasing urgency on the critical piece of information she had provided, the online connection. When Ms. Darlene came in and made her missing person report, she stated that there was a girl that Carson had met online. This digital acquaintance was now the paramount focus, a key, nebulous figure in the terrifying puzzle. Darlene's specific recollection of Carson mentioning the platform was key, grounding the search within the digital realm. Carson had told me that he had met a girl on Snapchat, and I said, "Oh, okay." She also recounted Carson's statement about their prior physical meetings, confirming that this was not merely an online-only fantasy, but a real-world interaction that had progressed. And he had told me, he said that he had met her a couple of times. But the crucial, lingering gap in information remained, the absence of any familiarity with this individual, which had always been a quiet source of concern for Darlene. I didn't know her. The fact that this person remained outside the family's orbit of knowledge heightened the sense of vulnerability and mystery surrounding Carson's fate. Law enforcement, as a matter of standard protocol in any missing persons report, systematically employs a phased approach, prioritizing the ruling out of non-criminal explanations before dedicating full resources to a potentially darker scenario. When there's a missing persons report, some of the first steps are to check hospitals, to check jails. These databases are systematically queried to rule out any benign possibilities, such as accidents, sudden incapacitation due to illness, or detainment for minor legal infractions. All those leads came up with nothing. No Carson Sistrunk was found within these conventional safety nets. With these standard avenues exhausted, and the urgency of a parent's intuitive dread escalating, investigators turned to modern technology to trace Carson's digital footprint, a common and often effective strategy in the digital age. Law enforcement applied for an exigent circumstance warrant with a cell phone company to ping his last location. This legal tool, invoked in cases of immediate danger or emergency, allows authorities to obtain crucial location data more rapidly, circumventing the slower, more comprehensive process of a full search warrant. The results converged precisely with the bank record information Darlene had so astutely obtained, validating her initial efforts and providing powerful corroboration. That location came up to New Heber in Mississippi at the same general time as that last transaction, with his credit card. This established a firm geographical and temporal anchor for Carson's last known legitimate activity, creating a pinpoint on the map for further investigation. With the location confirmed, the search expanded to include Carson's distinctive vehicle, a visible and identifiable asset in a missing person case. Rankin County sheriffs put out an alert on Carson's truck. The vehicle was easily identifiable, making it a visible target for vigilant law enforcement eyes across the state. Carson drove a Ford Raptor. It was silver in color, and it had a very distinctive darker colored hood. The distinctiveness of the vehicle proved to be a stroke of serendipity, a fortuitous confluence of circumstance and vigilant policing, showcasing the power of detailed bulletins and keen observation. It was just about happenstance that there was a sheriff with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department that was in the area and happened to see the vehicle, and he called it in. This discovery marked a crucial turning point, moving from theoretical locations to a tangible, physical lead in the burgeoning investigation. Sheriff's deputy actually saw that truck at the Old Hebron Grocery in Lawrence County. However, the deputy's initial approach was cautious and tactical, recognizing the immediate need to avoid tipping off any potential suspects or inadvertently disturbing a crime scene before reinforcements could arrive. This reflects a disciplined adherence to police procedure to preserve the integrity of a potential crime scene and ensure officer safety. But the deputy didn't see anyone matching Carson's description and waits for backup to avoid, scaring potential witnesses away. The situation was immediately assessed as potentially volatile and certainly complex. There are several individuals around the vehicle. In such a fluid scenario, no assumptions could be made about innocence or guilt. Every person present constituted a person of interest. Everybody is considered suspect is around that vehicle at that time until you can weed them out and find out what their connection is to Carson's truck. Why were they there around that truck? This highlighted the painstaking, methodical process of initial identification and questioning necessary to unravel the immediate circumstances separating the truly involved from mere onlookers or incidental passers-by. It speaks to the detective's patient, meticulous approach, understanding that initial appearances can often be deceiving. The narrative paused to prepare for the critical developments to come, foreshadowing the discovery of deceit and the exposure of a cunning fabrication that aimed to obfuscate the truth. The promise of unfolding evidence hinted at a perpetrator who attempted to mask her heinous actions with an elaborate falsehood, carefully crafted to misdirect and confuse investigators. Coming up, investigators discover a shady transaction. She said she purchased it from a man, and she gave the name that he went by as Seed Money. This introduction of a shadowy figure, seemingly a desperate and flimsy alibi, served as a psychological distraction, and, crucially, the power of visual evidence was about to be unleashed, providing undeniable proof that would dismantle a carefully constructed web of lies and pinpoint the last moments of the victim. And surveillance footage exposes Carson's last known location. You could see a figure inside the page, but you could not identify who it was. The suspense built, driving the narrative forward into the heart of the investigation, into the cold, hard realm of facts that would unravel a murderous deception. The geographical reality of New Hebron was reinforced, emphasizing the challenging and often isolating environment for the investigative team, particularly when searching for evidence or potential remains. While Carson's sister remains missing, detectives have located his vehicle in New Hebron, Mississippi. New Hebron, Mississippi is a very rural town, a lot of farmland. Oil and gas wells are very prevalent in that area. This depiction reinforced the difficulty of navigating such an isolated and largely unmonitored landscape, making it an ideal environment for illicit activities to go unnoticed. Upon arriving at the old Hebron grocery, detectives found the scene to be complex, with several individuals gathered around the distinctive Ford Raptor, their presence adding layers of potential complications and information. One person, however, immediately stood out, both by her gender in a group of males and by her undeniable control of the vehicle. When investigators arrive at the grocery store, they find a group of people gathered around the truck. One of them is a young woman. She had the keys to the truck. This possession of the keys immediately placed her at the very center of the vehicle's recent activities, making her the primary person of interest concerning the truck's whereabouts. Her association with the truck was further corroborated by eyewitnesses present at the scene. There were several other people around who said she was the one who had been driving that truck. Her identity was promptly established through standard questioning. She identified herself as Sierra Insco at that point. The natural line of questioning immediately connected Sierra to Carson's reported date, the pivotal piece of information that had initiated the missing persons investigation. Detectives asked Sierra if she's the woman Carson was supposed to meet. Her denial was swift and absolute, an initial attempt to distance herself from any knowledge of Carson or his fate, a classic deflection tactic. She claims to have no idea what they're talking about. Sierra said that she did not know who Carson's sister was. The discrepancy between her denial and her undeniable possession of his truck was glaring and immediately suspicious, given her undeniable possession of his valuable vehicle. The investigators probed further into mechanics of her alleged ownership. Obviously, they asked about how she came to be in possession of this vehicle. Sierra's fabricated explanation then emerged, introducing a fictitious, almost cinematic character into the narrative, a character designed to sow confusion and divert suspicion. She said that she bought it from somebody. She produced a bill of sale-like document that she had purchased a truck for $16,000. And she said she purchased it from a man, and she gave a name that he went by as C Money. However, the bill of sale was immediately transparent in its illegitimacy, a crude attempt at legal deception that, to any trained eye, only solidified suspicions of her guilt rather than alleviating them. However, a quick glance makes investigators question the legitimacy of the document. Of course, you could look and tell that it was not a real bill of sale because it's just written on a piece of paper. This amateurish forgery highlighted a perpetrator lacking in sophistication but clearly attempting to appear legitimate, an obvious tell to any experienced detective. The blatant disregard for proper legal documentation for a high-value asset like a Ford Raptor spoke volumes about the underlying illicit nature of the transaction, whether imagined or real. Despite the obvious falsehood of the document itself, investigative protocol demanded that no information be immediately dismissed or assumptions made. The thing about it is, you can't just discard that information and assume that she's lying about the transaction or about her story. Every lead, however implausible, must be pursued initially, thoroughly vetted, and systematically disproven before it can be truly dismissed as a rabbit hole. This rigorous methodology ensures that justice is based on verifiable facts, not on preconceived notions or quick judgments, a cornerstone of effective criminal investigation. Sierra continued to weave her intricate narrative, attempting to paint herself as an innocent party potentially caught up in a more serious criminal underworld, introducing a dramatic element of fear and intimidation into her concocted story. Sierra says she doesn't know C Money's real name or how the truck came into his possession. However, she reveals that he likely stole it based on their frightening interaction. She further elaborated, fabricating a detail about the supposed threats against her, another common criminal defense strategy to shift blame and gain sympathy. Sierra said that she had been threatened by him. Has she ever talked about anything that he would kill her? This portrayal of C Money as a dangerous, elusive figure was a transparent attempt to divert suspicion from herself and to introduce in element of professional criminality, an effort to create plausible deniability by associating the truck's acquisition with a larger, more menacing criminal enterprise. The other men present at the scene with Sierra also immediately became persons of interest, needing to be identified and their connections to Carson and Sierra ascertained. There was 3 males there with her at the truck. I got to find out what their connection is to Carson Sistron. If they knew Carson Sistron, what their connection is to Sierra Hensko. These individuals were questioned, and their statements claimed they were merely driven around by Sierra, claiming only recent acquaintance. None of the men identify themselves as C Money, but they say Sierra has driven them around for the past few days. They recently met the 20-year-old at work as she just moved to the area. Their testimony, while not immediately implicating, added a further layer of complexity to Sierra's rapidly unraveling narrative, suggesting a new social circle and perhaps an audience for her ill-gotten gains. A preliminary social and psychological profile of Sierra Hensko, gathered from those who knew her, began to emerge, sketching a picture of a restless and somewhat troubled young woman. A former friend recalled their initial acquaintance and her distinctive personality traits. I met Sierra through mutual friends. We'd be in classes together, and then we just, grew friendship through that. Her personality was described as robust and distinctive, standing out among her peers, embodying a certain fierce independence. She was a very nice person. She was very, tomboyish. She was the only girl on the football team in high school. This anecdote of her unique role on a traditionally male sports team speaks to a desire for attention, a willingness to defy norms, and perhaps a compensatory need for recognition or strength. She was a very well-known person, for sure, because she just had, a very big personality, so everybody knew of her. This description painted Sierra as someone who yearned to be noticed, whose actions were often performed on a large, public stage. However, her background also contained elements of instability and struggle, particularly concerning her family life, which often fuel psychological fragilities and a yearning for stability or belonging. She was struggling, with her parents, because she didn't have her mom in the picture, and then her dad wasn't home much either. This tumultuous home life likely contributed to a pattern of transient living, a lack of deep roots or consistent adult supervision. Her friend also noted a fading connection after Sierra's move to Mississippi and a new professional, direction that seemed inconsistent with her past. She never stayed in school. Whenever she moved to Mississippi, we did not talk much at all, and she told me that she was going to be moving there for a welding job. The friend's fading contact hinted at Sierra's transient nature, a characteristic that would prove challenging for investigators trying to pin down her exact movements in recent history. Indeed, Sierra's life appeared to be one of constant movement, reflecting a profound lack of firm roots and a persistent, perhaps unfulfilled, search for stability or belonging. Sierra struggled to find stability and continued to move around, living with various friends and family. Her geographical movements were varied, encompassing several states and a nomadic lifestyle, a pattern common in individuals with unstable home environments or underlying psychological issues that prevent them from establishing consistent social or professional ties. She had lived in Florida. She lived in Tennessee. She stayed with her mother on very few occasions, who lived there on the northwest side of Jeff Davis County. Her employment was similarly itinerant, characterized by temporary or seasonal work, lacking the long-term commitment seen in Carson's own professional life. Some of the farmers, the chicken farmers up in that area, she'll work for them. Sometimes she'll stay at some of their trailers on their property. The investigator's summary of Sierra's lifestyle painted a clear, stark picture. We're trying to determine where Sierra really hung out a lot and stayed, but she was a drifter. This transient nature made establishing her movements, her true associates, and her consistent behaviors a considerable challenge for investigators, as she left few fixed points for tracking. This constant movement could also be interpreted psychologically as an attempt to outrun internal demons, evade accountability, or to consistently create new narratives for herself without the burden of past scrutiny. Hallmarks of manipulative personalities. Given the deepening suspicions and her direct, unexplainable connection to Carson's missing vehicle, formal procedures were initiated to obtain a more complete and legally admissible account from Sierra Insco, unfamiliar with the new face in town. Investigators bring Sierra Insco into the Rankin County Sheriff's Office for a formal interview to learn more about her and the vehicle purchase. This step was critical to obtaining a more detailed and controlled account of her story, as well as to meticulously document her statements, knowing that any inconsistencies could be vital evidence. Sierra was picked up by the Rankin County Sheriff's Office investigators, and they also took the truck with them. The vehicle itself, now a crucial piece of forensic evidence, was subjected to a detailed preliminary examination before a full forensic sweep. During the interview, Sierra inadvertently or deliberately revealed a recent hangout spot with her friends, a detail that immediately caught the attention of the detectives given the geographical context of Carson's last known whereabouts and the nature of the previous bank transaction. Sierra says the last place she and her friends went was an old oil well in Jefferson Davis County. The pervasive presence of these isolated locations in the area was reiterated, highlighting the abundance of potential crime scenes and dumping grounds. There's actually hundreds of oil sites in the very rural areas of Jefferson Davis County. Her description of their activities at these sites further solidified the potential for a secluded, unsupervised environment, ideal for both illicit recreational activities and, tragically, for more heinous crimes. She said that her and some of her friends like to go to these gas well locations and party and smoke weed and stuff like that. This detail provided investigators with a crucial geographical area of interest and a behavioral context that was both relevant and deeply troubling. Recognizing the potential for the specified well site to be the very location of Carson's disappearance, perhaps even the scene of his murder, detectives requested Sierra to guide them there. This direct confrontation was a strategic move designed to gauge her honesty and potentially lead them directly to the truth. Detectives find her story suspicious, so they ask her to show them the oil well she and her friends went to. The nature of these sites was elaborated upon, again emphasizing their secluded and uniform characteristics, making them easily confusable for someone trying to deliberately mislead, a landscape perfectly suited for a calculated game of deception. The gas wells are small little plots of dirt that usually square. There may be a piece of pipe sticking out of the ground, which involves owning a few tanks on the side. Sierra's subsequent behavior during the guided tour immediately raised red flags, intensifying the investigators' doubts about her honesty and indicating a deliberate effort to misdirect. Sierra reluctantly agrees, but detective suspicions grow when she suddenly seems to forget where she went. She kept on, redirecting every time she could. This evasiveness was a classic tactic of deception, attempting to throw off pursuit, to literally run investigators down rabbit trails and consume valuable time and resources. Instead of pointing to the actual oil site, she pointed them to another one, and that was one of those rabbit trails that was very frustrating to law enforcement. This deliberate misdirection not only wasted precious time and extended the period of family anguish, but also strongly reinforced the impression that Sierra was actively concealing vital information, knowingly preventing the discovery of a crime scene. It was a clear demonstration of her deceptive intent, turning what should have been a straightforward tour into a frustrating game of cat and mouse. After several false starts, wasted miles, and persistent, patient questioning, Sierra finally, and perhaps unwillingly, led the investigators to a specific, remote well. After several miscues, Sierra finally guides investigators to a remote well. This particular site immediately felt different, resonating with a disturbing significance. Upon arriving, the investigators made a critical step in verifying the site. They brought Carson's vehicle to the scene for a physical comparison, connecting the mobile evidence to the fixed location. After a brief search, they find evidence it's the correct place. We actually brought Carson's vehicle down to the well site. It was on a record, on a rollback record. The critical piece of evidence that confirmed the specific well site was definitively linked to Carson's truck was the distinct impressions left by its tires in the soft earth. In fact, the tire trucks that were at that oil site matched Carson's truck. This forensic match was undeniable, establishing an irrefutable link between Carson's last known location, his vehicle, and this isolated patch of land. This confirmed Sierra's presence at the site with Carson's vehicle, shattering her earlier claims of ignorance. Considering Sierra's strange behavior, her evasiveness, and her proven deception, detectives naturally escalated their assessment of her potential culpability. Considering Sierra's strange behavior, detectives wonder if she knows what really happened here. The inherent suitability of these isolated sites for clandestine criminal activity was not lost on the seasoned professionals, a dark knowledge that guided their increasingly grim expectations. The gas wells, they're very secluded, they're surrounded by trees, be a good place to commit a crime, and possibly there could be a dead body laying close to one of these well sites. The weight of these possibilities hung heavy in the desolate air, turning every shadow and every patch of kazoo into a potential clue or a chilling discovery. The ticking clock underscored the brutal urgency of the investigation, as Carson's sister had been missing for over 2 days, raising the specter of diminished chances of survival with each passing hour, morphing from a search and rescue to a search and recovery. Carson's sister has been missing for over 48 hours, and while Sierra Insco steadfastly claimed she didn't know where he was, her lies and evasions had made her the unequivocal central figure of suspicion. And while Sierra Insco claims she doesn't know where he is, investigators suspect she is lying. To bolster the investigative effort and bring additional resources and expertise to bear on the now highly suspect case, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, MBI, was formally brought in, signifying the escalated seriousness of the situation to aid in their ongoing search. The New Hebron Sheriff's Department enlists the aid of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. This interagency cooperation is vital in complex cases, bringing specialized forensic and investigative expertise to the forefront, consolidating efforts and preventing critical oversights. Agent Riley's arrival on the scene marked a new phase of the detailed forensic examination, bringing a fresh set of eyes and a wealth of specialized training to the grim task. We've come in to assist when called upon by the local sheriff's offices or police departments. The timing of the MBI's involvement was precisely noted, marking a late-night initiation into the already unfolding drama. When I got the call, it was a little after midnight on the 7th of September, 2022. The vehicle, Carson's beloved Ford Raptor, had already been secured on a flatbed wrecker for transport, awaiting its meticulous forensic processing. The truck had been placed on a flatbed wrecker. Approaching the secured vehicle, Agent Riley employed a standard investigative practice for nocturnal scene examinations, a thorough sweep with a high-intensity flashlight, meticulously inspecting every surface for latent clues. When I walked by the truck with my flashlight, I would just shine the light on the floor just to look at it. With this new, focused perspective, the agent discerned something profoundly disturbing and immediately conclusive, something that had been missed or diluted during the initial, less forensic-focused search. With the new perspective, Agent Riley notices something alarming. I noticed blood on the bottom of the tailgate. This was not just a splash or a minor smear. It indicated a significant event, a substantial loss of blood. The blood on the tailgate was further accompanied by unsettling traces elsewhere on the truck, highly consistent with a hurried and amateurish cleanup attempt. You could see the remnants of blood inside the truck and the cracks, some debris that was back. There looked like it had probably been washed out with a water hose at some point. This observation provided compelling evidence of a desperate attempt to erase the physical signs of violence, solidifying the presence of a perpetrator actively attempting to conceal their crime. The most concerning revelation, however, lay beneath the vehicle, indicating an even larger and more traumatic blood loss, something that unequivocally moved the incident from merely suspicious to outright violent. And up under the truck, there was a large amount of what appeared to be blood on the underside of the bed and on top of the spare tire. This finding fundamentally shifted the understanding of the incident from a mere disappearance or accidental injury to a full-fledged violent crime. The agent's professional assessment, informed by years of experience with crime scenes, was immediate and grim. I knew that something bad had happened to somebody or something. The sheer volume and location of the blood left no room for doubt. Carson was almost certainly a victim of a brutal assault, and his chances of survival were effectively nil. Confronted with this undeniable physical evidence of violence, Sierra was again asked for an explanation, offered an opportunity to reconcile her claims with the grim reality. When asked about the blood, Sierra has a seemingly innocent explanation. Her fabricated narrative, hastily constructed and drawing on common roadside occurrences, invoked a large animal impact. Ms. Insko claimed that she'd hit a deer and that throwing in the back of the truck is where the blood came from. However, this explanation crumbled under the most basic physical inspection of the vehicle, exposing the lie with brutal clarity. But with no collision damage to the truck, detectives find that difficult to believe. A vehicle involved in a deer strike, especially one that resulted in significant bleeding, would inevitably bear impact damage to its front or sides, evidence conspicuously absent on Carson's pristine 4Raptor. The absence of impact points on the front of the vehicle or visible damage to the bodywork directly contradicted her story, making her explanation laughably implausible to trained investigators. This significant, demonstrable lie, coupled with the undeniable presence of human blood, solidified the investigators' resolve and stripped Sierra of any lingering benefit of the doubt. She was actually detained and taken back to right-hand counter. Her repeated attempts at deception, rather than helping her evade culpability, only served to paint a clearer picture of her guilt and her desperation. With Sierra now firmly in custody, Agent Riley immediately requested specialized forensic resources to process the truck and its contents, recognizing the imperative to meticulously collect every shred of physical evidence that could unravel the complete story. While Sierra is taken into custody, Agent Riley calls one of the Bureau's forensic units to the scene. The detailed forensic examination of the vehicle uncovered additional crucial items that hinted at the complexity of the crime and the gender of its perpetrator. In the course of their documenting this vehicle, they found some bags that contained clothes in the back of the vehicle. The nature of these garments immediately indicated their likely owner. Those clothes were traditionally been worn by a female. Significantly and terrifyingly, these clothes also bore traces of the very violence that occurred, a silent, damning witness to the crime. It appeared that there was some blood spatter on those clothes. All potential evidence, the blood samples from various parts of the truck, the clothing, was carefully collected for precise laboratory analysis, understanding that DNA evidence would be pivotal. They took samples from inside the truck, in the bed of the truck, underneath the truck, and did their job very well. And all that stuff was taken to the crime lab and to the DNA lab in Jackson. Another piece of evidence from the truck provided a potential scenario for the violent encounter itself, helping to reconstruct the brutal sequence of events. There was also blood spattering on the back windshield of the truck. The forensic implications of this finding were grim and specific, and what that implied to law enforcement that somebody had been sitting in the back of the truck could very well have been shot. This suggested a seated victim, likely shot from a lower angle, with the spatter indicating the force and direction of the injury. It presented a horrifying tableau of Carson's final moments, slumped on the tailgate, shot, and bleeding before being disposed of by the time the meticulous, hours-long inspection of the vehicle was complete. The darkness of night had given way to the first light of dawn, providing optimal conditions for an expanded and systematic ground search. By the time the inspection is complete, it's morning, and investigators have enough light to search the area for any sign of Carson. Metal detectors were immediately deployed across the well site to locate any ballistic evidence, such as shell casings, which would pinpoint the exact location of the shooting and provide crucial evidence about the weapon used. I took my metal detectors up there, and we searched that whole well-side area to see if we could locate any shell casings. Despite their thoroughness, the initial search of this particular well site yielded little additional hard evidence, emphasizing the challenge of finding small items in an expansive, often overgrown rural environment. They searched extensively for any other evidence, but found nothing. They couldn't find anything other than those tire tracks. This initial lack of immediate human remains, despite the overwhelming blood evidence, suggested either a cunning disposal or a further act of misdirection by the perpetrator. Sierra's consistent deception, combined with the frustrating lack of further evidence or the victim's body at the initial search site, prompted Agent Riley to revisit an earlier, chilling line of thought that had nagged him during Sierra's initial, meandering guidance. Sierra seemed to be real deceptive in her answers. It really wastes a lot of time on a suspect. Tells you a story that's not true. This strategic misdirection, often employed by cunning criminals, serves to consume invaluable investigative resources, delay discovery, and create a fog of confusion, buying time for the perpetrator. It occurred to Agent Riley with increasing certainty that if their suspicions about Sierra were correct, her intimate knowledge of the extensive network of oil wells in the county could be a double-edged sword, enabling her to commit the crime in a truly remote and unwatched location, but also providing her with the local topographical intelligence to deliberately misdirect investigators, sending them on fruitless searches down tangential paths. It occurs to Agent Riley that if their suspicions about Sierra are correct, she could have easily led them to the wrong oil site to throw them off. This pivotal insight, a spark of intuitive deduction born of experience, fundamentally redirected the investigative strategy. It led the agent to make a crucial contact within local resources deeply familiar with the region, someone whose daily life intersected with these very remote locations. I got to thinking about what Ms. Inksko had said several hours earlier about her frequenting these gas well locations, and that led me to believe that she was familiar with a lot of them. A critical call was placed, activating an informal but highly effective network of local informants, individuals whose daily work took them into the vast, sparsely populated areas Sierra frequented. So I called a friend of mine who was checking and reading the meters and stuff on a daily basis. The request was simple, urgent, and conveyed the gravity of the situation. Be extraordinarily observant for anything out of the ordinary in this otherwise predictable landscape. I called him and said, "Look, please have your guys that's checking these wells, have them all over the next couple of days. Be real observant. Be watching things out of the ordinary." This widespread dissemination of a simple directive to an army of local, unassuming workers proved to be a stroke of investigative genius. The response was astonishingly swift, almost impossibly rapid, a testament to the effectiveness of local knowledge and quick communication. And within 15 or 20 minutes, he called me and said one of his drivers had just found a body. This stunning turn of events immediately validated Agent Riley's intuition and shattered any remaining flicker of hope for Carson's survival, transforming a missing persons case into a confirmed homicide. The immediate aftermath of this grim discovery, the careful processing of this new, incredibly significant crime scene, formed the next critical phase of the investigation, bringing with it both the tragic certainty of Carson's fate and the promising likelihood of finding justice for him. The narrative paused to acknowledge the profound gravity of the discovery and the immediate shift it brought to the entire investigation. It reiterated the grim reality of Sierra's consistent prevarication, now undeniably exposed by the recovered body. The details of her prevarication about her financial situation and the truck's acquisition were about to be starkly contrasted with reality. Coming up, detectives confirmed Sierra has been lying to them. She didn't have a job. She shouldn't have money to have a truck like that. Her flimsy, easily debunked story was a testament to her poor judgment and desperate attempts at deception. And the critical question remained: would this undeniable proof of her dishonesty be sufficient to connect her directly to murder? Her tenacity in maintaining her fictional story, especially regarding the mythical figures she had conjured, spoke to a delusional sense of control and a deep-seated denial. But as it proved she committed murder, she stuck with her story. See, money was probably the most. Wanted man in southeast Mississippi. The fleeting hunt for her fictional accomplice further illustrated the resources consumed by her web of lies. The body, located after 3 agonizing days of desperate searching, definitively confirmed the worst fears for Carson Sistrunk's loved ones, marking the brutal end to their anxious vigil. After 3 days missing, a body matching Carson Sistrunk's description has been located at an oil well site in New Hebron. Investigators, receiving this critical call, immediately diverted all resources to the new location. Investigators immediately drive out to the second site, which is located a few miles away. The approach to this grim discovery was meticulously described, painting a picture of deliberate concealment, an attempt to hide a horrific act beneath the canopy of nature. It's a dirt road, and as you get on top of the well site area, you can see tracks, and they stop, and then they back up into a bunch of kudzu vines. That's where the body was laying. Kudzu, a notoriously invasive and dense vine, provided an almost perfect natural shroud, its tangled mass effectively obscuring the body from casual view. The environmental conditions, exacerbated by the passage of time and the intense summer heat of Mississippi, had already begun to take their inevitable, grim toll on the remains. Decomposition was very bad. There was all maggots on the body, flies. You could tell they'd been there for a couple of days. The presence of insect activity, a key indicator in forensic entomology, further supported the timeline of 2 to 3 days post-mortem. The rapid rate of decomposition was noted as being entirely typical for the region and season, reinforcing the urgent need for a medical examiner. It's full-fledged summer in September here, and with the heat, it's not uncommon that a body could decompose in 2.5 to 3 days. The state of the badly decomposed remains presented an immediate challenge to both rapid identification and a clear determination of the precise cause of death through visual inspection. Alone, the damage to the body makes it nearly impossible to determine cause of death or to make a positive ID, despite these immediate visual limitations. The lead investigator, drawing on contextual evidence and personal observation, held a strong, yet professionally guarded, conviction regarding the victim's identity. I was pretty confident that that was Carson Sistrunk's body laying there, but professional protocol dictated a formal, scientific confirmation. But without confirmation from the state medical examiner, I couldn't say that. The methodical process of securing the crime scene, collecting every piece of associated evidence, and transporting the remains was paramount. Adhering to strict forensic guidelines, everything was collected, put in the body bags, and turned over to the coroner and sent to the crime lab. The discovery unequivocally shifted the nature of the case from a missing persons investigation to an active homicide inquiry, demanding a more aggressive, targeted investigative posture. Once we found the body, we had good reason to believe that it was a homicide. This grim certainty solidified the immediate imperative for investigators to aggressively pursue Sierra Insko once more, as her story had now been completely and tragically debunked. That's when I knew I had to question Ms. Insko some more to try to figure out the truth of what happened. while the remains were being meticulously transported to the state medical examiner's office for detailed examination and definitive identification. Investigators swiftly returned to Rankin County to confront Sierra Eansco once again. The stakes of the interrogation immeasurably raised. While the body is transported to the state medical examiner's office, investigators return to Rankin County to interrogate Sierra Eansco. Despite the undeniable physical proof of the body's discovery and the escalating evidence against her, Sierra remains steadfast in her fabricated narrative, clinging desperately to the original set of lies she constructed, demonstrating a remarkable, almost defiant level of denial. She stuck to her story that she had told the investigators earlier that day on No Carson Sistrunk. I've never seen Carson Sistrunk. I don't know anything about the body. You got the wrong person. Her denials were absolute, a stark refusal to acknowledge the mounting weight of physical and circumstantial evidence, a psychological defense mechanism where admitting culpability was clearly unfathomable to her. She adopted a classic evasive stance, attempting to redirect blame and project innocence. However, at this precise juncture in the investigation, law enforcement had not yet secured the incontrovertible, concrete evidence that could directly link Sierra to the theft of the truck and specifically to the murder itself, an essential legal threshold for sustained detention on the most serious charges. Law enforcement did not have any concrete evidence to show that Sierra stole the truck. The possibility, however remote or disingenuous, that she had acquired the vehicle innocently, perhaps even believing C-Money's claims, still existed in purely legal terms, necessitating a cautious approach to avoid jeopardizing future prosecution. It could very well have been that somebody gave Sierra the keys and she had the truck in good faith. Confronted with this lack of definitive, direct proof connecting her to the homicide at that exact moment, legal counsel advised her release, a decision that underscored the meticulous adherence to due process in the American justice system. Even when dealing with a prime suspect, we conferred with the district attorney's office, and they said we did not have enough information to hold her. That's when we really had to release her from jail. This temporary setback, though immensely frustrating for investigators who knew in their gut Sierra's guilt, highlights the rigorous legal standards required to detain and charge individuals, ensuring that evidence is solid before depriving someone of liberty. It's frustrating, but you have to run every lead down. The temporary freedom of Sierra Eansco, though agonizing for the Sistrunk family and a tactical challenge for the police, was a necessary step in building an airtight case, ensuring that when she was finally charged, the evidence would be irrefutable and able to withstand the intense scrutiny of a courtroom. Despite Sierra's temporary release, detectives understood that the truth lay not in her evasive statements, but in verifiable actions and indisputable records. Their focus immediately shifted back to a location that represented Carson's last confirmed transaction and an objective source of information, the Quick Stop gas station. Detectives need solid evidence to refute Sierra's story, so they go back to the one place they know both she and Carson had been. The New Hebron Quick Stop gas station was a crucial point of interest, a convergence zone for financial activity and potential surveillance footage, a common touchstone in criminal investigations. Carson's last credit card transaction was at an ATM at a New Hebrew Quick Stop gas station. That was done at 8:39 p.m. The owner of the establishment, fully cooperating with law enforcement, granted access to the critical visual record. We talked to the owner of the store, found the video footage of the day and time in question. The surveillance footage, once retrieved, became an immediate and powerful tool for reconstruction, a silent, irrefutable witness to Carson's final moments. The video footage was captured on Sunday, September the 4th, until after 8 p.m. And lo and behold, there it is. The moving images provided a concrete, undeniable visual of Carson himself. He's driving the truck. This visual was powerful, providing incontrovertible proof that Carson was indeed at this location, exactly as the bank records had indicated. As Carson pulled up to a gas pump, the surveillance footage revealed a detail that would dramatically alter the trajectory of the investigation, directly and unequivocally refuting Sierra's consistent denials of ever knowing or being with Carson. As Carson pulls up to the gas pump, investigators see he isn't alone. The visual evidence, while partially obscured by glare on the windshield and off the hood, left no doubt as to the presence of another individual, a shadowy figure, in the vehicle's passenger seat. The glare on the windshield and off the hood of the truck, and you could see a figure inside the passenger side, but you could not identify who it was. This vital, yet initially unidentifiable, passenger became the new focal point of the investigation. Carson's actions inside the store provided further chronological anchors and definitively confirmed his identity, removing any doubt about the subject of the video. He gets up, comes inside, uses his debit card. The critical verification of Carson's clothing, cross-referenced with a gruesome discovery, provided a powerful forensic link, connecting the living person in the video to the deceased body found days later. It was tremendous for us to be able to look and to verify the same clothing that Carson had on was the same clothing that was on the body we found at that well site. This irrefutable match solidified the identification of the victim and provided a chilling temporal anchor for his last hours. While Carson paid for the gas inside, a different male individual approached the truck, engaging in an interaction that immediately hinted at a prior acquaintance with the passenger. While Carson pays for the gas inside, a different man approaches the truck. The nature of this interaction was immediately apparent to the experienced observers watching the footage. What I noticed immediately was that the male subject that came up to the pastor in Mr. Sistron's vehicle, it was obvious that they knew each other. You could tell by his body language, and they talked for probably a minute or so. This new man was a local, and his interaction with the still unidentified passenger of Carson's truck suggested a casual familiarity, adding another layer to the developing social tableau. The immediate, paramount question confronting the investigators at this stage was a precise identity of the mysterious passenger in the front seat of Carson's truck. Sierra, in her previous, convoluted attempts to deflect blame, had introduced a fictional character into the narrative, see Money. This made an immediate line of inquiry. Sierra, she said that a guy named C. Money sold her the truck, so law enforcement wanted to check to see if this guy in surveillance video was actually C. Money. Local knowledge and community connections proved invaluable in identifying the individual who had approached the truck and interacted with the passenger. We were able to locate the person, the male subject, by showing the video footage to some people in the area, and all his name was Curly. This man was a known local figure, frequently seen in that area. This man frequented that area. Once identified, Curly was located and shown a copy of the surveillance video. His testimony became a critical piece of the puzzle, definitively and unequivocally identifying the person sitting in the front seat of Carson's vehicle. Once they found Curly, they showed him a copy of the surveillance video, and he was able to identify the person sitting in the front seat of Carson's vehicle as Sierra Insco. Curly's personal connection to Sierra solidified his identification, adding an additional layer of credibility to his statement. Curly said that he knew Sierra Insco personally. They had dated in the past, and he was very adamant that that's who was in the truck. This statement was a death knell for Sierra's meticulously constructed edifice of lies. Despite this connection, Curly vehemently denied being the elusive C. Money, a claim substantiated by thorough background checks and the inability of law enforcement to connect him to any criminal alias. Despite the connection, Curly says he isn't the C. Money they're looking for. After we identified him, and knowing his background and everything, we rolled him out pretty quick. This systematic process of elimination, a crucial component of sound investigative work, allowed detectives to focus their efforts with renewed precision. Curly's definitive statement, combined with the irrefutable evidence of the surveillance video, served as direct, damning proof that Sierra Insco had unequivocally lied to law enforcement during her previous interrogations. But his statement, combined with the surveillance video, gives detectives proof that Sierra lied to them. This exposure of her foundational lie irrevocably shattered her credibility and fundamentally shifted her status in the investigation from a mere person of interest to the prime suspect. Once we identified Ms. Insco as being the truck with Carson at the quick stop, she was our prime suspect. The detective's subsequent investigations then delved deeper into Sierra's social circle, meticulously tracking down acquaintances who frequented the local party scene, attempting to gather additional context, observations, and any pre-existing knowledge of Sierra's motivations or plans. Speaking with locals on the party scene, investigators tracked down some acquaintances who knew Sierra and asked what they know. Some acquaintances recalled seeing Carson with Sierra even before the fateful Labor Day weekend, suggesting their connection wasn't a one-off date, but a recurring interaction. According to some eyewitnesses, they had seen Mr. Sistron with her before, a couple of weeks prior to him being murdered. This detail eliminated the possibility of a purely spontaneous, isolated encounter, pointing towards a pre-existing, albeit hidden, connection. Other observations from Sierra's acquaintances provided critical insights into her motives and financial status, directly linking her desire for material possessions to her actions. The investigators have some friends saying that she was going to get a new vehicle before her birthday, and all of a sudden, she's riding around in one. This sudden and unexplained acquisition of a new, highly valuable truck, particularly a Ford Raptor, immediately struck those around her as highly suspicious, given her known, often transient and unstable, financial circumstances. The people we interviewed said that they knew she didn't have a job. She shouldn't have money to have a truck like that, and it kind of made them nervous because they didn't think she had actually bought the truck. The blatant discrepancy between her known means and her sudden, ostentatious possession only deepened their unease and solidified suspicions that something illicit had transpired. Furthermore, those around her began to notice other highly suspicious details, particularly concerning the bed of the vehicle she now possessed. Details that hinted at a violent act. Some of the people investigators spoke to reported seeing blood in the bed of the truck. When confronted about the disturbing sight, Sierra offered a bewildering, inconsistent, and desperate array of explanations, her clumsy attempt at cover-up only serving to highlight her culpability and panic. She'd say she had a deer, she had a dog, she had a hog. I think she told somebody that even the person that owned the truck, sister, had hit a deer. The scattershot approach to lying, offering multiple, mutually exclusive excuses, indicated a mind in turmoil, desperately improvising explanations that were clearly nonsensical. Her overall demeanor after the incident also underwent a marked change, a profound psychological shift discernible even to her casual acquaintances, further illustrating her profound unease and internal guilt. Sierra had showed up Sunday night late and wanted to rinse out the truck. She seemed to be acting strange, acting different, like she hadn't acted a few days before. This sudden, frantic urge to rinse out the truck late at night, combined with her agitated state, was a glaring red flag. The instinct of those around her, sensing profound deception and distress, correctly registered that something deeply wrong, something potentially heinous, had transpired. They knew something was up. They didn't want to get in it. They didn't want to get near it. This collective intuitive recoil from her and the truck underscored a pervasive sense of dread and unease she projected. Everybody was on to her and wanted no part of it. Her desperate efforts to involve others in her deceptive cleanup had inadvertently turned her own acquaintances into unwitting witnesses to her highly suspicious post-crime behavior. The circumstantial evidence against Sierra Insco was growing by the minute, a rapidly accumulating and increasingly cohesive body of proof pointing directly to her guilt. But for the serious charge of murder, absolute forensic confirmation was paramount. The accumulating body of circumstantial evidence against Sierra Inns Cow was growing by the minute, forming a rapidly converging web of suspicion around her. The circumstantial evidence against Sierra Inns Cow is growing by the minute. However, circumstantial evidence, while powerful and persuasive, often needs to be supported by more direct proof, particularly